Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Cheva Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashta Prayashvabhadrishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyutama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Yam Pravrajantam Anapetam Apeta Krityam Dvaipayana Viraha Katara Juhava Putreti Tanmayatayo Taravo Bine Dustam Sarva Bhuta Hridayam Munimana Tosmi Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vijnana Goswami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Tarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yantah pravishya mama vachim imam prasuptam sanjivayata kiva shakti darak svadhamna nyam shahasta charana shravanat vagadim pranannamo bhagavate purushaya tubhyam svasyastu vishwasya kalach prasidatam dhyayantu bhutani shivam nithodaya Manascha Badram Bhajata Tadoksha Jai Aveshyatam No Harpya Hai Tuki. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, and those who are, all of us who are trying to become devotees, we are making a very glorious attempt to understand the flow of the narration of Srimad-Bhagavatam, which is supposed to ultimately bring us to the lotus feet of Krishna. And it's a very amazing result of hearing Srimad-Bhagavatam. Srimad-Bhagavatam indeed gives us Krishna, not just the conception of Krishna, not just the theory how Krishna, who he is, but as it is said in Srimad Bhagavatam itself, that it hridyavarudya te trakritivishu shrushubhistakshanat, that Krishna becomes the prisoner of our heart. Hridyavarudya te. If we do it properly, if we hear Srimad Bhagavatam properly, and the first condition, of course, is shushrusubhi. We should be eager to hear. And therefore, Srila Vyasadeva, in his Mangalacharan to this book, he incites this eagerness within us. He wants to say the implication of this second verse of Srimad Bhagavatam is that, we have to be really eager to hear about Krishna, because the result of hearing this book is very amazing. There is no need of any other book. He says very clearly there. And Vedyam Vastavamatra Vastu Shivadam Tapotrayon Mulanam. You can understand by reading this book or by hearing this book the Vastavam Vastu, the essence of all essences, the absolute truth, which is Tapotrayon Mulanam, which is completely, totally, absolutely destroying the root of all the threefold miseries. Kim Vaparai Rishvaraha, what is the use of any other book? Because this book is created by Srila Vyasadeva or Srila Shukadev Goswami in his maturity. It's a mature fruit of his endeavor. It's the crown creation of Srila Vyasadeva. And if you hear it with proper mood, and if you're kritibih means inoffensive. If you have the proper some purity of the heart, if you're simple, if you're not crooked inside, then you will be able to get Krishna immediately. So that's the whole thing, is that we're trying to understand how the flow of Srimad-Bhagavatam goes, so that we can swim along with this flow, and hope that sooner or later this flow of Srimad-Bhagavatam, of narration of Srimad-Bhagavatam, will bring us to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. And actually, this is the only thing which we should do. Because Bhakti... Can you mute your microphones, please? Bhakti is the path of mercy, and it's just like the swimming along with the flow. So we are trying to swim along with this flow of Srimad-Bhagavatam and understand how this flow of Srimad-Bhagavatam gradually brings us closer to Krishna. What are the stages and destinations which we pass by flowing with Srimad-Bhagavatam before we arrive to this amazing destination, being together with Krishna in the spiritual world, not with the not theoretically but practically. So we arrived already with you together by your mercy and by your blessings. Ultimately, we are here on the 7th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam. So we more or less passed the half of Srimad-Bhagavatam, and technically speaking, we already achieved Bhakti Vaibhav degree according to the scheme which Srila Prabhupada gave. So we all Bhakti Vaibhavis, we have this Vaibhav or special power of Bhakti. This is what reading or studying of the first six cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam is supposed to give us. Bhakti Vaibhav, a very special power which Bhakti gives, the very special opulence which is only specific to Bhakti. And now we're on the 7th canto, the beginning of the second part of Srimad Bhagavatam. And this 7th canto structurally is very simple. You know, after all these complicated cantos, like 4th canto with so many intricate stories connected, or sometimes seemingly disconnected with each other. After 5th canto with also quite a difficult structure, 3rd canto. Of course, 3rd canto is relatively simple because it's more or less repetition of the same topic. We arrive to the 7th canto, and 7th canto is surprisingly simple, at least from the first look at the 7th canto. It only has one story, and it has two very clear and very distinct parts, which again, if we superficially look, are seemingly disconnected. You know, the first story is, of course, the very famous story of Prahlada and Hiranyakashipu and their clash, and ultimate victory of Prahlada, of pure bhakti over the demonic mentality of Hiranyakashipu. And I mentioned last time that we have to see where is the conflict in the canto to understand the essential message of the canto. And again, superficially looking at the 7th canto, we can see or we can deduce or come to a conclusion that it's about the clash between the pure devotion and demonic mentality. But not really so. It's not about the clash of demonic mentality and pure devotion, because we all know that these two mentalities are incompatible with each other. So it would not be such a glorious achievement to describe it. And on the top of it, in the second part of Srimad Bhagavatam. So the essential message of the seventh canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is much more subtle and much more important for us to understand. How this, and then all of a sudden, after glorification of Prahlad and his pure devotion and everything else, all of a sudden the narration of Srimad Bhagavatam switches the gears in a very abrupt way, and we have the second part, which is starting from the 11th chapter of the 7th canto till the end of the 7th canto for 5 chapters. Narada Muni is describing Dharma Shastra. Narada Muni, in his conversation with Maharaja Yudhishthir, describes basically the principles of Dharma, which seems to be kind of downgrading the topic. We already reached a very highly elevated topic. Prahlad Maharaj, his ecstatic symptoms and his complete total surrender and devotion to the Lord. And all of a sudden, we're talking about the duties of the social orders, of varnas and ashramas, and the duties of wife and duties of vanaprasthas and sannyasis and brahmacharis. More or less, the structure of the second part of the 7th canto reflects the normal structure of any Dharma Shastra, whether it's laws of Manu or laws of Yajnavalkya or Vishnu Smriti. It more or less repeats the same sort of structure, which seems to be something out of place. Or I don't know, or maybe it's the foundation of spiritual life. Why all of a sudden this is being told in the 7th canto? So these are certain questions, few questions, which somebody may ask by trying to understand what is the message of the 7th canto. And I will try to answer these questions in the course of my narration. I also want to say from the very beginning that I will have to end exactly at 12:30 Indian time. So let's see what we will be able to do within this time which I have today. So, as I told you many times, this verse, Atra Sarga Visargaschas Tanam Poshanam Utaya, the 6th canto primarily describes Poshanam, which is Tadanugraha, how the mercy or the nourishment of the Supreme Lord manifests in our life, and not only in our lives, in the lives of all the devotees. And we came to know how Lord Krishna maintains mixed devotees and gives them some sort of protection, and how he relates or how he deals with the pure devotees like Vritrasur. And the amazing example of a pure devotee of the previous canto, 6th canto, is of course Ajamil. So we came to know and we studied a little bit what Poshanam means. Poshanam basically means the Lord's grace. The implication, very important foundational principle which is there, is that the progress in bhakti does not really depend on your own endeavor. Ultimately, it only depends on the mercy of the Lord, and because it depends on the mercy of the Lord, as opposed to your own endeavor. One is wondering, what am I supposed to do? How shall I obtain this mercy? On the other path, it's very clear. On the path of karma, everything depends on your piety, on your pious deeds. You do as much pious deeds as possible, and you get the result accordingly. On the path of jnana, you try to meditate upon the Brahman or the Supreme Lord, or whatever. Not really Supreme Lord, but you try to meditate, and this is also your own endeavor. You try to purify your heart. Of course, to meditate, you already have to have pure heart. But depending on the extent of the purity of the heart, your meditation goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And you sit. Initially, you sit for 5 minutes. Then you sit for 10 minutes. Then you sit for 1 hour. Then you sit for 2 hours. Then you sit for 2 weeks, non-stop. And you meditate and concentrate your mind. Depending on its purity, your ability grows. And accordingly to your endeavors, you get the results. That's a very important principle and very understandable principle for us who are causal. The principle of cause and effect. You do something, this is the cause. You want to obtain something, this is the effect. And the more properly you do something which is causal, the quicker and you get the result. And the result will be more impressive. So that's a very understandable cause and effect relationship on other paths. Path of bhakti is bewildering. But being completely causeless, this path of bhakti is totally spiritual, because anything which is causal, anything which has cause, which implies cause and effect relationship, is material. Therefore, the ocean which separates the spiritual world from the material world is called causal ocean. Everything which is on this side of the causal ocean has this causal nature. And we are so programmed to be causal that we always, even on the path of bhakti, we try to find some cause or to do something which will give us the results as quickly as possible. And then, if somebody says to us that bhakti is causeless, we say, it's impractical. What do I do? But 7th canto answers this question, what you are supposed to do, maintaining the causeless nature of bhakti, which is the most important. The 7th canto tells you what is your duty, and which, if you perform, increases greatly your chances to get causeless mercy of Krishna. Of course, there is no cause and effect relationship, but nevertheless, there is something which actually is the cause of causeless bhakti. And this is what the 7th canto is all about. What is the cause of causeless bhakti? And not only the cause of causeless bhakti, but the cause of the nature which we have. Why it is described, it's a very fundamental question in the path of bhakti. Why it was not described before? Simply because the previous canto really, if we study it properly, the 6th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam really is supposed to awaken within our heart strong desire to get pure bhakti. Because the description of the pure bhakti, which is given in the 6th canto, is unparalleled. As I said, the story of Ritrasura is lakshanam of the whole Srimad-Bhagavatam because it describes the amazing power of pure bhakti, which turned the complete demon, which lives in the heart of a complete outright demon, who is killing everyone and everything, but still he is a pure devotee, he is glorified, and he is what is the most amazing quality which is coming to us because of bhakti, is that he is totally fearless. Vritrasura, I'm talking about Vritrasura. He's totally, absolutely fearless, and he's completely free. You know, when you read the descriptions of the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, you will be totally flabbergasted, amazed how Vritrasura is free and how Indra is bound. How even mixed devotion doesn't make you free, because you're still bound. You're bound by negative emotions, by the fear, by envy, by anger. This is all depicted in the 6th canto. Indra, he is going through all these dramas, internal dramas. All these negative emotions are in his heart. And in front of him is Vritrasura, who is a demon. And this demon, he's just smiling. And this demon is about to be killed, and he's not afraid. And he's welcoming his death. And he's saying, oh, so nice, dear Indra. You will kill me, and I will go back to Godhead, and you will stay here in this material world. So this amazing image of the power of pure devotion is supposed to be very contagious. We actually are supposed to develop very strong urge and desire to become pure devotees, because it will solve all our problems. No negative emotions whatsoever. Only elevated emotions of devotion towards the Supreme Lord. That's a very important part of the message of this 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Portionum, what is the mercy? So while reading this 6th canto, the very strong desire how to get this devotion, how to obtain, why Indra couldn't obtain it? Why it is Vritrasura who obtained it? And why not Indra? So this question is supposed to arise in our heart. And the 7th canto answers these very important questions. How to obtain, how to get pure devotion? What is the only way? The only way to get pure devotion? Well, not only way, 2 ways. Actually, 7th canto describes 2 ways how to get the pure devotion. One, very direct and straight way to obtain pure devotion, and another one is roundabout way, which is Varnashrama. So I'm more or less going little ahead and telling how these 2 parts of the 7th canto are connected. They're connected because they're describing the ways of obtaining pure devotion, 2 different ways of obtaining pure devotion. So I'm now in Bangalore, which is the seat of Madhvacharya, his followers. And I'm associating closely with some of the representative of Madhava Sampradaya. And perhaps it's appropriate to mention Madhvacharya and his philosophy now. Why? Because Madhvacharya, being the incarnation of Hanuman and Bhima, he very much stresses in his philosophy the point of complete total dependence of Jiva upon the Supreme Lord. That everything which we get from the Supreme Lord. We cannot do anything ourselves. The only thing which we can do is try to serve with all our meager endeavors. Like, for example, Madhvacharya, in commenting on Brahma Sutra, which is one of his major achievements, if not the major achievement, in his Brahma Sutra Bhashya, he says that Janmadya Syayataha. While commenting on the 2nd sutra of Brahma Sutra, he says, what is Janmadi Asyayataha? It's the definition of Brahman. Who is Brahman? Brahman is the one from whom Janma Adi is coming from. Janma means the creation of this material universe. And usually we know what Janma Adi means. Janma Adi means the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the material world. Madhvacharya says, no. He says, not only this. He says, Janma Adi means creation, sustenance, and destruction of the material world. It also means niyamita, which is complete power or control of this world. It also means, besides niyamita, it means jnana and agyana. Jnana is coming from the Supreme Lord, and agyana is coming from the Supreme Lord. Your ignorance is coming from the Supreme Lord, and your knowledge is coming of the Supreme Lord. We're all depending on Him. This is the definition of Brahman according to Madhvacharya. And he says two more things are coming from the Supreme Lord. The moksha and bandha, the bondage and liberation is also coming from the Supreme Lord. So he stresses, according to the tenets of his philosophy, total, complete dependence on the Supreme Lord, that everything is coming from Him. But then the question arises, is everything is coming from Him? Isn't He partial? Why some people get bhakti, other people, they cannot become bhaktas? Why some people are enlightened and other people are ignorant? Why some people get liberation and other people are not getting liberation? Like Madhvacharya very much stresses the point at the end of the 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says that for those demoniac people, I'm putting them in the demoniac species of life for eons, for eternity. I am just pushing them down because they're demoniac and they will belong to this. And you get the image of the Supreme Lord, who is the absolute autocrat, and very whimsically he kind of rewards some souls and completely, unjustly, or maybe not completely unjustly, but nevertheless, very partially pushing them down, because He's the Supreme Lord. Ultimately, everything belongs on Him. So that's His point. And of course, Srimad-Bhagavatam gives different emphasis on this, which is for us very important to understand that Srimad-Bhagavatam explains very beautifully and very clearly what is our part in this whole drama, in the drama of our life. And this is appropriate to describe in the 7th canto, because the 7th topic of Srimad Bhagavatam is uti. Uti means the impetus, what pushes us to act the way we act. What is this force inside our heart which basically defines our life, defines our destiny, and how to make sure that this nature which we developed, acquired nature, will be improved or rectified. And is it all completely whimsical decision of God that we have certain nature, and this certain nature, as Krishna himself says to Arjuna, "Oh Arjuna, you're fortunate because you have this Daivi Sampat, you have this divine nature, so you will be liberated." Okay, so, we're fortunate we got this divine nature. How about others? And if it's so, then what is the use of preaching? Does the preaching really have some tangible effect? Or by preaching, we are just more or less separating those fortunate souls who already have inclination towards bhakti from all these unfortunate demoniac souls who will never be able to get Krishna's mercy? So there's so many related questions to this. And it's very important for us to understand the proper answer to this and to properly emphasize certain things. So this is what seventh canto is all about, how to develop certain nature which is compatible with bhakti, which is not even compatible with bhakti, only compatible with bhakti, but which is favorable to bhakti. Bhakti will be given to us, no doubt about it. But the seventh canto is how this bhakti will be given, through which channel the bhakti will be given, and how to behave or obtain the nature which will be favorable for us to receive bhakti, ultimately to be the recipients of bhakti. So that's the much more subtle message of the seventh canto, rather than a description of the clash between the pure devotion and demonic mentality of Hiranyakashipu. So, and of course, the seventh canto starts with this first chapter where this question is being asked. Maharaja Yudhishthira, or rather, first Maharaja Parikshit asked this question, and about the partiality of the Lord, whether the Lord is partial, why Vritrasura was a pure devotee, whether the Lord was partial or not. So Maharaja Parikshit asked this question, and Shukadev Goswami starts describing the conversation on the same topic between Narada Muni and Maharaja Yudhishthira. And Narada Muni answers the question of Maharaja Yudhishthira, who was completely amazed by the display of Krishna's mercy upon Shishupal, when Shishupal merged into the body of Krishna, even though he was an envious demon. He was blaspheming Lord Krishna. And despite of all of this, when the soul left his body, Krishna made it visible. Usually it's not a visible event, but in case of Shishupal, Krishna made sure that everyone sees that his soul is just entering Krishna's body, the body of his enemy. So that's what is supposed to, what is being described in the first chapter, and therefore Maharaja Yudhishthira is asking this question: how was that possible? Can you explain the mystery behind the whole thing? And basically he asked, directly asked, whether Lord is partial or impartial. If he is partial, if we say that he is partial, it's a dosha. It's a fault on the side of the Lord. If he is impartial, that's his beauty. But how he is impartial, even though he apparently sympathizes with the demigods and opposes the demons. Of course, Narada Muni starts describing the story behind Hiranyakashipu and Shishupal and Ravana and Kumbhakarna, Shishupal and Dantavakra and Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, describing this Jai and Vijay story in the first chapter of Srimad-Bhagavatam. But what I want to say, if you want to understand the whole seventh canto, this first chapter is enough. If you really understand what this first chapter is trying to tell you, this is enough. So, basically, okay, before we go into some details of the other chapters, let me immediately state that what actually defines our nature. By looking inside our heart, by going to an astrologer and listening to an astrologer who is describing different traits of our personality, we sometimes wonder, how did it happen? Why did it happen? And the seventh canto, not going into details of the law of karma, formulates the most important basic principle of karma, or our rebirth, or our nature, acquired nature. And the most important principle formulated in the seventh canto is that if we acquire the curses of devotees, and not only pure devotees, but devotees of all sorts, if we are not careful in dealing with devotees, no matter who they are, they may not be completely pure, still, if we behave in such a way that we acquire the curses from them, we will develop demoniac mentality. And vice versa, if we somehow or other, by hook or by crook, obtain the mercy of devotees, especially pure devotees, then this is the most direct and most immediate way to obtain bhakti in our life. Answering the question which I asked in the very beginning of this presentation, where the bhakti is coming from, the bhakti is not coming from the Supreme Lord. Or in very rare occasions, the bhakti is coming directly from the Supreme Lord. In most of the cases, the bhakti is coming from the heart of a pure devotee, and for that, you somehow or other have to please the pure devotee, have to enter into some personal relationship with the pure devotee. And how the bhakti comes from the heart of pure devotee to the heart of other living entity, by the service of living entities, by the service attitude, submissive attitude, by the submissive hearing. Actually, the pure devotees, they speak and you listen. And this is how you can get bhakti. That's the only way, the most direct way to get bhakti, by hearing, and not only hearing, but hearing submissively, like Prabhupada puts in the first canto, the art of submissive hearing, how to hear about the Lord with a proper attitude. And vice versa, if you somehow or other acquire get upon your head the curses of devotees, like Kumaras, then you will inevitably develop the demoniac mentality. It's actually a very important point with a lot of practical implications. Sometimes we are not very careful in the society of devotees. We see so many faults in other devotees, and sometimes we misbehave with other devotees, so sometimes we start openly criticizing, going to the internet and trying to expose the faults of other devotees. And in this way, we get so many curses of devotees. And it's not without a reason that Jai and Vijay were cursed by Kumaras, who were not pure devotees at that time. And even though they were not pure devotees, nevertheless, the curse was very, very effective. And that's what we can see. We can see how by indiscriminately offending devotees, we acquire or we develop certain demoniac qualities, certain demoniac traits, certain forces within our mind are being awakened by this activity. You know, what we are? We are is a collection of certain energies within our mind. at this moment of time. If we perform actions, appropriate actions, some of these energies will become even stronger, and some of these energies will subside. So if we offensive or neglectful towards other devotees, then for sure what will happen? Gradually, the demonic forces within our mind, which are there already, will be stronger and stronger and stronger. The demonic tendencies of our mind will be stronger and stronger and stronger. And vice versa, if we try to acquire mercy of devotees by serving them, by feeding them prasadam, by opening one's heart to them, by becoming simple with them without trying to cheat them or manipulate them or exploit them, we actually feed this very important nature of ours, which is also the devotional nature, the devotional forces within our mind. And that's all described in the first chapter of 7th Canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, with also extremely important principle. We obtain certain nature already. We have nature. And somebody is more devotionally inclined, somebody is less devotionally inclined, somebody is not at all devotionally inclined. But nevertheless, whoever we are, if we got a little speck of devotion in the form of little shraddha in the narrations of Bhagavad Gita, not even Srimad Bhagavatam, if this speck is there, we can gradually blow this little spark of devotion, and it will become huge fire which will eliminate to the ashes all our sinful reactions, sinful activities. How? By again and again hearing about the Lord. That's a very important point. Narada Muni describes the principle of sadhana, the principle behind any practice. What is the principle behind any practice? You absorb your mind. Yana tena prakarena manah Krishna niveshayat. By hook and by crook, as Prabhupada translates this verse from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is the paraphrase of the verse from the first chapter of the 7th canto, by Narada Muni. By hook and by crook, manah Krishna niveshayat. Mind has to enter into Krishna. If by all means, by all emotional tricks, by all methods which we adopt, our mind enters within Krishna, concentrates on Krishna, then you will be successful in your sadhana. And you basically become what you meditate upon. If you meditate upon, upon some abominable qualities of other people, by being concentrated on their faults, you will obtain the same nature. You're not better than them. If you're always angry that these people, they don't behave properly, they misbehave, they're wrong, and you always talk about them, you become like them. No difference whatsoever. Prabhupada pointed it out to Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. When Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj said that once to Prabhupada, he complained to Prabhupada, I joined this spiritual movement, and I thought that there is no prejudice in the spiritual movement, because he was, experiencing in his life being in a black body, and that he's mistreated. And he said, here I see the same thing, the same mistreatment. And Prabhupada said, yes, you're right, because humans are humans here or there, but if you concentrate on this, you become like them. If you notice it even, you become exactly like all those people, because you are just obsessed with their faults, with their qualities, and you're only thinking about them. So again, this is the first chapter of 7th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, and we only have not so many minutes, 35 minutes till the end of the lecture, so let's see how far I will go. But the most important thing I already stated here. You acquire your general nature from the previous experiences of your interaction with devotees, magnified by the present experience of your interaction with the devotees. If devotees curse you or don't like you, or if somehow or other you, always fight with the devotees or offend devotees, then inevitably the demoniac traits of your personality will be strengthened and ultimately will fructify in the next life when you become a demon, forgetting all your emotional experiences, or not at least forgetting. We will never forget genuine devotional experiences, but they will be covered over. But if you obtain the mercy of devotees, your devotional nature will be magnified. And then by obtaining this uti, the impetus to act in a certain way, you have this divine nature, pious nature. Then your duty is to magnify it by concentrating your mind on Krishna and doing some devotional service. And that will gradually bring about the complete success. And anyone is doing this because Hiranyakashipu, when he obtained his initial nature, he perfected this nature by, again, performing certain sadhana, which ultimately brought about ruination of Hiranyakashipu. Anyway, having said this, we'll go to the second chapter of the 7th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, Hiranyakashipu, the king of the demons. And very important things is happening in this chapter because in this chapter, Hiranyakashipu, or how it is said in Srimad-Bhagavatam itself, Sri Hiranyakashipu, preaches the spiritual philosophy. He tells a very interesting story about King Suyagya, who was killed, and lamentation of his wives, and Yamaraj appearing on the scene as a little child, and Yamaraj telling the story about the hunter. I mean, it's a classical example of a good preaching, which was apparently quite successful. Why it is in the 7th canto? Why in the world the 7th canto, which is supposed to depict the demonic mentality of Hiranyakashipu, starting from him describing very beautifully and very correctly the spiritual philosophy. He lists the qualities of the soul, and he is so convinced about these qualities of the soul, and people listen to him and they say, yes, you're right. So why it is there to drive home a very important point is that there is preaching and there is preaching. There is demoniac preaching. Demons also preach. The very fact that we preach doesn't mean that we're devotees. So that's a sad news. We can remain demons while preaching spiritual philosophy, while preaching very correct philosophy, but there will be certain consequences. First consequence is that nobody will become a devotee as a result of our preaching. As we see, Hiranyakashipu, he did pacify his relatives, his mother and his sister-in-law and his nephews by telling all these stories. But first of all, they didn't become devotees themselves. And moreover, Hiranyakashipu himself was not changed. Sometimes we are very enthusiastic and we say, by hook and by crook, just preach, it will be good. Not really. one of the messages of the 7th canto is that you have to have a very proper mood to be a preacher. You basically have to have a bhakti. If you want to be a preacher, you have to have bhakti. Maybe some little bhakti, but still, nevertheless, you have to have some little bhakti. Because what is preaching? As I said, preaching is the way to communicate between the heart and the heart. Preaching is not about knowing shlokas. Preaching is not about knowing philosophy. Hiranyakashipu knows philosophy. His life doesn't change because he knows the philosophy. He's still demon. And in the next chapter, he will perform severe austerities and he starts misusing the acquired powers and everything else. Even though he has the knowledge of the soul, he has the knowledge of everything. So nothing changes. And Prahlad Maharaj, he preaches to his schoolmates in the same canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam. These two preachings are opposed to each other. And Prahlad Maharaj is successful in his preaching. Why? Because he preaches from the heart. He doesn't preach from here. Sometimes we preach from here. I'm speaking on my own experience, unfortunately. You preach from here, you're very convinced, you feel good because you are, somehow or other show your intellectual superiority to other people. But what is the result? Zero. It doesn't change your own heart. It doesn't change the heart of your followers or your listeners. And therefore, in the 9th chapter of this 7th canto, Prahlad Maharaj, as a preacher, as the real preacher of Bhakti cult, he will describe the proper mood of a preacher. What is the mentality of the preacher which will actually equip him with the proper ability to influence other people. Because it's a very relevant point, because we are being inspired by Srila Prabhupada's, his own example and his preaching. We all try to preach, and that's good in one sense. But we also have to be very conscientious. What is within my heart? What is the impetus within my heart? I recently spoke with Chaitanya Chandra Charan Prabhu. It's a very wonderful devotee from Russia, preacher, disciple of Srila Jayapataka Maharaj, and he's a spiritual master. He has many, many followers. And he's a wonderful preacher. And he told me a story which is very appropriate in this connection. He told me that, once in the very beginning, in the beginning of 90s, when Russia was in complete chaos and appeared very rich people, and majority of people became all of a sudden very poor. Devotees were invited to a rich person's house to conduct a program. And devotees came. Devotees were completely, totally paupers. They didn't have anything. They didn't even have socks. And they came to this mansion, 3 stories mansion, where the owner is, in his kitchen and everything, and he tried to serve the devotees, this particular rich person. And there was a group of devotees. Chaitanya Chandra Charan Prabhu was conducting this program, so he was speaking. And he said, while I was speaking, this person, he fell asleep. He just couldn't relate. But nevertheless, despite the fact that he probably didn't understand much, after the program, he became so pleased and so impressed. He started serving the devotees. He was saying, everything here is yours. Please go to the sauna. Please do this and that. So he kind of gave a very royal reception to the devotees. Somehow or other, he was touched. His heart was touched. And not only his heart was touched, but the heart of one devotee who was present there was also touched, because he saw the reaction of this person, amazing transformation which happened with this person after preaching. And after this program, he approached Chaitanya Chandra Charan Prabhu and he said, "Can you teach me how to preach this way?" And of course, the implication behind this question was, can you teach me how I can influence rich people in the same way you influence them? Can you teach me the trick by which I can also obtain, such a power over these people? And that's not a proper mood of a preacher. So that's what I wanted to say. One very important message of this 7th canto is that, yes, we have to preach, no doubt about it. It's the best way to concentrate our mind upon Krishna. There's no better way than preaching, but at the same time, we have to be very conscientious. What is our motivation? What are we doing? Why we are preaching? Are we preaching like Prahlad Maharaj, or are we preaching like Hiranyakashipu? And, let's not open a preaching school, named on behalf of Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyakashipu's preaching school. He gives a very important example how not to preach. This story in the 2nd chapter of the 7th canto shows the futility. And the next chapter, of course, explains that nothing changed in his own heart. He used preaching as a tool, as a manipulation, as an instrument to manipulate other people, but not really to give them bhakti or to give them even purification of the heart. He just used it for his own purposes. And sometimes, unfortunately, we also may fall into this trap by using preaching for our own purposes. And that's a great offense. That's actually what will develop our demoniac mentality. So then we know, as the flow of the narration goes, Hiranyakashipu, by performing his household duty, pacifying his relatives, he himself wants to show that he is more important than God himself. And it's very interesting and also important to say, to mention that in the 2nd chapter, the beginning of 2nd chapter, Hiranyakashipu starts accusing the Supreme Lord in being impartial. Again, that's a very important illustration, or very important point, how the demoniac mentality works. Srimad-Bhagawatam is very instructive in this regard. Srimad-Bhagawatam is teaching us, or is very vividly depicting to us what demoniac mentality means. And one of the traits, one of the important characteristics of demoniac mentality is that demons do think that God is impartial, that God is partial. Hiranyakashipu says the Supreme Personality of Godhead has given up his natural tendency of equality towards the demons and demigods. Although he is the Supreme Person, now influenced by Maya, he has assumed the form of a boar to please his devotees, the demigods, just as a restless child leans towards someone. I shall therefore sever Lord Vishnu's head from his trunk by my trident, and with the profuse blood from his body, I shall please my brother Hiranyaksha, who was so fond of sucking blood. Thus shall I too be peaceful. When the root of the tree is cut, the tree falls down with the branches and twigs automatically dry up. Similarly, when I kill this diplomatic Vishnu, the demigods from whom Lord Vishnu is life and the soul, will lose the source of their life and wither away. So again, sometimes when we experience something anishta, something undesirable in our life, we start saying, God is not fair. God is not just. Why he is doing this to me? So as soon as this sort of thought comes to our mind, we have to understand this is our demoniac nature speaks. When we start kind of accusing the Lord and this, when we don't understand that the Lord is totally impartial, and not only impartial, he's merciful, whatever he gives to us is needed to us. He doesn't make mistakes in this regard. So that's an important point. How this demoniac mentality manifests. Demoniac mentality acquired by our previous offenses, previous and present offenses. How does it manifest? We can also notice it. We offend somebody, or somebody is displeased with us, a devotee is displeased with us, and this sort of thoughts will come to our head, automatically will come to our head. So there is some sound in the mic. Please mute them. Anyway, so we are on the third chapter. In the third chapter, Hiranyakashipu's brilliant plan to become immortal, and Hiranyakashipu performs austerities, and he meets with Lord Brahma ultimately. And while meeting with Lord Brahma, he starts flattering Lord Brahma. He actually wants to occupy the position of Lord Brahma, but when he sees Lord Brahma, he flatters him. And moreover, Lord Brahma also flatters Hiranyakashipu. Lord Brahma starts glorifying Hiranyakashipu to pacify him. And Hiranyakashipu is trying to get something from Lord Brahma by the way of flattering him. This is how this demoniac relationship are being developed. When you're manipulating other people, trying to exploit other people, you flatter them to get something from them. And of course, Hiranyakashipu, he is trying to, very sincerely, trying to become immortal. He's trying to become immortal by neti-neti process. So when Hiranyakashipu asked the boon from Lord Brahma, please, I should not be killed by some of your preachers. I should not be killed during the day. I should not be killed during the night. I should not be killed inside. I should not be killed outside. I should not be killed this way or that way. It's, as Vaishnava Acharyas point out, it's the equivalent of neti-neti process. When people are trying to understand who is God by saying he's not this, he's not that, he's not this. So Hiranyakashipu in the similar way saying, let God, who is God? The God is not this and not that and not this and not that. But the God is not this and not that. God is there. And he will prove to Hiranyakashipu that no matter how much you try, I am there. And I will kill you, even though you try to avoid it. And then the fourth chapter, of course, says or describes how Hiranyakashipu, after obtaining the boons from Lord Brahma, starts misusing his power, starts exploiting everyone in the universe. And demigods complaining to Lord Vishnu, please help us. And Lord Vishnu says, don't worry. When Hiranyakashipu will offend his son, who is a pure devotee, he will be finished. Not before that. So that's also an interesting point. That you may go on offending, but sooner or later, you will offend a pure devotee. Because your pride will be increasing and increasing and increasing. You start with some small devotees, this and that, finding some faults in them, and you end up by offending Srila Prabhupada or somebody else. So we have to really control this demonic tendency which is there within our heart. Otherwise we will be finished. We will definitely be finished. The fifth chapter is very important. Fifth chapter is actually the key chapter. If we try to get or to extract the essence of the seventh canto, of course, the first chapter is fundamental, it's the foundation. The fifth chapter exactly describes the process which I already mentioned, how to acquire the bhakti from the heart of devotees, how to connect with the devotees, what is the process by which we can connect with the devotees. And we know this fifth chapter describes how Hiranyakashipu, once being in a very pleasant mood, called his son Prahlad, and he set Prahlad down on his lap, and he was smearing his head, and he's so affectionate to his little son who just started going to Gurukul. And he said, please let me know what is the best thing which you, please, tell me what is the best thing which you learned in Gurukul. And of course, Prahlad Maharaj says that, best of the demons, just give up your attachments. Because sadasumudvigna diyo asat grahat, when you're attached to asat, to the impermanent things of this world, you will be always sadasamudvigna, you will be always disturbed, and you will never feel peace. So hitvatma patam grihadanda kupam, just get out from this dark well of all your attachments of your material life, and vanam gatayat harim ashrayata, go to the forest, go to Vrindavan, as Prabhupada translates this vanam, and obtain the shelter of Krishna. But this is not the most important instructions of this fifth canto. The most important instructions go after that. Very important instructions. It's basically 3 verses by Prahlad Maharaj, where he explains how one can get bhakti. Matirna Krishna paratak svatovan mithobi padyat grihavratana madanda gobhir vishatam tamishram punah punascharvita charvananam. Why some people, even meeting with the devotees, they don't become devotees themselves, or they become very slow, nothing changes within their heart, because Prahlad Maharaj says, Matirna Krishna paratak svatova. You will never be able to develop Krishna consciousness or this special mati, special intelligence, which is attached to Krishna. Matir na Krishna parato svatava. You will never be able to do it on your own endeavor, svataha, on your own by reading books or whatever. Will not happen. Parataha, if somebody else will tell you, it will not happen. Shandana Marka will not be able to give you Krishna consciousness. Those who are not devotees themselves, those who don't have bhakti, they cannot do this. Why? Adanta Gopir Vishatam Tamishram Adanta Gopir Vishatam Tamishram Punah Punascharvita Charvananam. Because you will always be attached to this tedious experience of sense gratification. Adanta gobir vishatam tamishram. You will only enter into this dark region by punascharvita charvananam, by chewing what has already been chewed. In other words, you will never be able to get rid of this attachment to sense pleasures on your own. So what you're supposed to do, nate vidu svartagatim hi vishnum durashaya bahirartha manina andaya dandayar vajye manasa pisha tantri murudam nibadha. So the next verse says that, these people who have uncontrolled senses, they don't know svartha gatim, they don't know their own self-interest, they don't know what they need. And therefore, durashaya bahirartha manina, they are extroverts, bahirartha. They always try to find values or pleasures or something good in the external things, bahirartha, as if there is something which is valuable outside. They always run after cars and money and this and that, but this is all bahirartha. They take shelter of these external things, bahirartha maninas. They always think about this. They don't know their svartha gatim, and durashaya. They always take this wrong shelter, something which doesn't give you shelter. Durashaya. Not durashraya. I was confused by some preacher, wrong preacher, whom I heard in the beginning of my Krishna consciousness. He would always say durashraya, whereas here durashaya, they have futile hopes to become happy by this bahirartha, by the pursuing this external happiness. And then the most important verse of this chapter and probably of the whole 7th canto. Naisham mati stavatu rukramangri sprishatyanartha pagamayadhartha mahiyasham padarajo abhishekam nishkinchananam nanivriti yavat. Until you do abhishekam from the lotus feet of a pure devotee who is niskinchana, you take sincerely the dust of the lotus feet, padarajo abhishekam, and do abhishek, you purify your consciousness. You will never be able to get rid of anarthas. Sometimes people say, I have this anartha, I have that anartha. And then the preachers say, okay, let's do this training or that training. It just doesn't work. Naisham mati stavadu rukramangrim. So it will not happen. Anartha upagama, the purification from anarthas will not take place within your heart. The only way is to open your heart to a pure devotee and to listen to the pure devotee and try to serve the pure devotee. That's the only way how you can get bhakti. So therefore, why I say that these verses are key verses for the understanding of the 7th canto, because they explain both how to acquire the wrong nature, the demoniac nature, by punascharvita charvananam, just by repeating sense gratification, by being engaged in the sadhana of sense gratification, and by taking the guidance for those who are blind, andaya tandayar, of those who are basically materialistic themselves, who are attached, by trying to learn from them, rather than finding somebody who is niskinchana and sincerely trying to serve his lotus feet, and by this way obtaining bhakti. So that's what I wanted to point out, that these verses are very essential verses, besides many important verses in this 7th canto of Srimad-Bhagawatam, like Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, or Kumara Acharet Pragyo. And actually, the next chapter, 6th chapter, is Prahlada's preaching to his schoolmates. And he starts from this verse, which Prabhupada put into the introduction of Srimad-Bhagavatam, or preface to Srimad-Bhagavatam. Kumara charet pragyo dharman bhagavatan iha durlabham manusham janma tadapya dhruvam arthadham. Even though this human form of life is so adruvam, it's temporary. Nevertheless, it can give you eternal benefit. It can give you a lot of arthadam. It can give you real artha. But for that, you have to start now. You have to start practicing this Bhagavad Dharma now, today, this very second. Bhagavad Dharma. Bhagavad Dharma means thinking about the Lord, hearing about the Lord, serving the devotees of the Lord, trying to obtain their mercy. So this is how Prahlad Maharaj preaches to his schoolmates, explaining to them the futility or triviality of sense gratification, that you can get sense enjoyments in many species of life. But in human form of life, you will get something special. Yeah, of course, you may not get such a variety of food in dog's body. Of course, on a garbage pile, there is a lot of variety of food you can choose. But the point is that the experience which the dog has or the human being has, the dog has by eating stool or by eating some garbage, and the human being by eating the most exquisite dishes from the, special cuisine, Chinese cuisine or whatever. The experience is the same. The happiness which you get is the same. There is no difference. Absolutely no difference. But in the human form of life, you can get something else. And that's the point of Prahlada Maharaj's preaching. And then Prahlad Maharaj, of course, in this next chapter, he explains his own example, saying how he obtained this knowledge in the womb of his mother. Even though, he was not doing much in terms of service. His only service was to listen to Narada Muni. But because he listened to it in a proper attitude, being completely open to the words of Narada Muni, then it transformed his nature. So again, we have to go really quickly on this. The chapter 8 is a very spectacular scene of killing Hiranyakashipu, the last encounter between Prahlad Maharaj and Hiranyakashipu, when Hiranyakashipu asks, "Show me your God." As the bona fide atheists do, they always say, "Show me your God. Where is your God? Where is your God? Where is your God? Is he here?" Yes, he is here. It is said, Srila Prabhupada once he explained that when Hiranyakashipu asked Prahlad, is he in this column? If he is in this pillar? And Prahlad Maharaj looked at this pillar to which Hiranyakashipu pointed out. And at that moment, Nrisimhadev manifested himself in the pillar, and he kind of twinkled to Prahlad Maharaj. "Yes, I'm here." He just said, yes. He gave him a sign. "I'm here, I'm present, don't worry." And of course, Prahlad Maharaj knew it. And, the 8th chapter and the 9th chapter is, of course, very important chapter of the whole 7th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, where, as I already said, Prahlad Maharaj is beautifully describing the mood of a preacher. He is the pure devotee, and he wants to spread this notion of pure devotion because he knows how important it is. And also very important point is that Hiranyakashipu wanted to become immortal by crooked means, by making an exceptions, by trying to exclude Krishna from the picture. How to make the world where there is no Krishna. This is the atheistic endeavor, the very important atheistic endeavor. The atheists, they want to live happily in this world without Krishna. So exactly this was the boons or the request of Hiranyakashipu towards to Lord Brahma. How to exclude Krishna from the world, where he is not, but he is everywhere, so it's a futile attempt. He wanted to become immortal and he failed. Prahlad Maharaj didn't want to become immortal. He wanted to become the servant of the Lord, knowing this philosophy, and he became immortal. And Hiranyakashipu wanted to exclude Krishna from the picture of the world, from his world. And Prahlad Maharaj, he wanted to include Krishna. He knew that Krishna is already included into this world. So, and then the 10th chapter, last chapter of this part, of the first part of the 7th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam is, of course, very important dialogue between Nrisimhadev and Prahlad, where Nrisimhadev is asking him to ask for a boon, and Prahlad Maharaj is chastising Nrisimhadev and saying, you know, you're a bad master, because you think that I was serving to you for this reward. And only bad master is trying to kind of pet or flatter his servant. And the bad servant is doing this. I'm not a bad servant, so stop it. And, you know, there is some competition between Nrisimhadev and Prahlad Maharaj. And of course, you know, somebody will say that Nrisimhadev was victorious. Somebody will say that Prahlad Maharaj was victorious. But we are followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So when a devotee, pure devotee, competes with the Supreme Lord, we always say that the pure devotee wins. So this wonderful part of Srimad Bhagavatam describing the power, immense power of pure devotion is finished in our very short description. And I'll probably say a few words about the second part, how they're connected in my next class. This 5 last chapters of the 7th canto, they are important. And as I already said to you, the first 11 chapters explain the direct way how to obtain bhakti, by pleasing the devotee, by serving the devotee, by taking the dust of his lotus feet upon one's head and by listening to him. That's what it means to take the dust of his lotus feet upon your head, by carefully listening to him and opening your heart. And the second part is describing the indirect way. What if you didn't have a chance to meet with a pure devotee? Nevertheless, the Lord provided a very beautiful arrangement for you to gradually prepare your heart to meet with the pure devotee and to listen to the pure devotee in a proper mood. And this arrangement is called Varnashrama Dharma. Varnashrama Dharma is an indirect way to obtain the mercy of the Lord through his devotees, by preparing yourself to meet with the pure devotee. That's what Varnashrama Dharma is all about. It's not about, you know, covering your head, that all the women should be in the kitchen with covered heads and nothing else should happen. And they should, you know, anyway. Varnashrama Dharma is how to purify preliminary one's heart from this incessant desires of sense gratification, and to prepare to meet the pure devotee in a proper mood and surrender to Guru. That's it. I have to finish. I already overdue my time. I have to run somewhere else. So thank you very much. I'm sorry for this.
Maharaj, thank you so very much. Though I must say